awesome hack day and tutorials and a bunch of great presentations. My name is Tom Morris, and we have a great slate of speakers here. Before we get started, first like to thank our sponsors, who are Google, who bought the food for us today, and actually, hold on 2 seconds. Mute myself so I'm not distracting myself. And Hill Holiday, who provided this awesome venue with a great view and amazing facilities. So to kick things off, I'd like to have John Running, who heads up the Technical Innovation Center here, say a few words about Hill Holiday and some of the opportunities that they have available. Here's John.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I won't take up too much of your time because I'm sure you don't want to hear too much from me. But just wanted to welcome you all here. We're so excited to support the dev community here in New England, Boston. My team is about 20 or so people who are interested in this kind of stuff, developers and experienced designers. We believe in making things for people from brands, and that means making things that are useful and helpful that people will opt into. And we need people just like you. So just want to put a plug in for this place for you to think about, us when you're thinking about places to work. I wanted to call out a couple of my colleagues here, Eric and Mike. We're going to be here throughout the day. If you have any questions about Hill Holiday, what it's like to work here, they're both developers here. Please talk to them. So that's enough plugging of this place. Hope you have a great day.
And for those of you who don't know, Hill Holiday is one of the premier ad agencies here in Boston. John didn't mention that, but because it's so well known if you deal with ad agencies, but if you haven't heard of them, that's what they do. So they do a lot of cool stuff. And thanks also to Google, who not only provided the food today, we'll be having lunch later, and they also provide a lot of support in terms of presentation materials and all kinds of other stuff. So we really couldn't make this happen without any of the sponsors, without our speakers, and without all you guys. So we really appreciate your involvement here. So if this is your first event, GDG is a group of developers that are interested in Google technologies. We're not controlled by Google. We're independent. They do help us out with sponsorship from time to time, but we set our own agendas, and we kind of pick what types of events we run based on interest from you guys. So if you're interested in getting involved, help organize, if you want to speak, have a topic that you're interested in talking about, and you don't need to be an expert on it. It's something that we have speakers at all different levels. We have people with all different backgrounds, from hardcore software engineers to product management folks to designers. We really focus on development, but we have a range of other things. And we try and keep it fun. So hope to see you at future events. So this is our speaker for today, or our agenda for today, and we're going to try and schedule it as much as we can. Got off to a little bit of a late start, but I'm going to cut this short, so we'll make up some time there. Great slate of speakers. We're going to be starting off with Amruta Akput, who's going to be giving an introduction to Polymer. Here's Amruta. And we'll have a little bit of juggling here. Actually,
don't worry about the microphone.
So what type of video connection do you have? You don't need to worry about the mic. Okay.
And Tom, for some reason it's now showing up fine, so we don't even have to share the screen.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to Polymer Polytechnic in Boston, and I'm really excited to present about web components and Polymer today. So, just a brief introduction about myself. I'm Amrita, and I'm working for Dassault Systems as a front-end web applications developer, and using web components and Polymer. And using web components and Polymer basically makes my task of designing UI very easy, very quick, and that's why it gets me very much interested in this technology. So let us get started. So here is the brief agenda for today. We'll start with an overview of what exactly web components and Polymer are, and then I can tell you like how to get and where to find components that have already been developed by somewhere, and finally we'll see like how you all can join the web components revolution. So let's get started. So web components overview. So what exactly is web components overview? Before going into that, I would like to mention about what are the problems that we are currently facing with the current web development using HTML and this JavaScript. So it's like no longer we are developing for just laptops or desktops. There is an explosion of screen sizes. Your app needs to work on tablets, on mobile phones, on smartwatches, and that too of different sizes. So making your app work on different screen sizes and getting like an app-like experience is pretty challenging these days. And so it's very important for your app to be responsive. Let us take like a simple example of building UI tabs. So building a UI tab looks like pretty simple, right? But unfortunately, like just to build a simple UI tab, this is like a simple example using Foundation. So there are some libraries, like every time you want to develop a simple thing like a UI tab or any other UI widget, you keep googling for what is the best framework available, what are the best libraries, and there are different ways to go about implementing a particular thing. So there are frameworks which use like a combination of HTML and JavaScript to achieve that. There are frameworks and libraries which just mostly focus on HTML, or some focus just on JavaScript. And in the end, we end up like having a lot of options to develop a go about developing a particular thing. And supposedly, like even if you go about consider one particular framework or library, it's not like the solution from that particular framework will work just like that with some other library. It's nothing like that. They're not interoperable. Or say if you develop a module in Angular, it might not work like directly with something in React. So that's the problem. Or even if you develop something, develop the UI tabs in one particular project, you might not be able to use it exactly in the same way in some other project. So that's the problem. And it results in a lot of boilerplate code. So like if someone is new to HTML, he might think like for him it might look like building tabs should be easy, and suddenly when he's exposed to some code like this, he might get frustrated as to how exactly like it's so difficult to build a simple thing like just tabs. So this is where web components come in. It avoids the confusion by having less code. It is pretty declarative. And say like if we take the example of constructing paper tabs, you can just mention the tabs over here. So you want 3 tabs in knowledge, history, and food. And by looking at this, someone who is even new to HTML can easily understand how to add a 4th tab, or say how to remove a particular tab. That's pretty straightforward, and anyone can go about doing that. And more than that, it's even possible that you can just grab the component, or say this paper tab, and just use it in some other project that you want, and just change the name. Like if you in some other project you want it to be called as information, so you can just use it in some other project very easily. So that's the beauty of web components. They are interoperable, and they're just like HTML, so they're even composable. So what exactly are web components? Web components are not just like one particular thing, but they are a collection of standards. So let us go through get an overview of the different standards in web components. The first one is custom HTML elements, so which allows you to define and extend existing native elements or extend someone else's custom element. So let us take so to show like what problems it solves. Let us see this example of Gmail. So this is Gmail, and this is how it looks when you go to the developers to the console, and you see like you can when you see at this divs, you can basically figure out what exactly is going on. I personally, out of curiosity, had one day, like even before knowing web components and Polymer, out of curiosity, I just one day like sat and just tried to see like what the structure of Gmail looks like, and all I came across is this, and I couldn't just figure out like what's going on, and I was like totally confused. I kept on opening div after div after div, and it was like a total mess. I couldn't really figure out. So this is the problem. Like it's not like Gmail it's not a problem of Gmail being complicated or something, but it's the problem of HTML not being keeping up to our demands. So this is where custom elements can help us. It's declarative, so you can just create new custom HTML elements and declare it, use it declaratively, like you would use any other div, or you would use a label or a text box. So they are declarative, and another thing is they're meaningful. So since they are like any other HTML element, you can treat them like any div, or add event listeners. You can use document.create element to create a new element, and they'll just behave and act like native HTML elements once you register and create it. So you can, as you can see over here, you can add an event listener and so on and so forth. And secondly, there is a common way to extend it. So say if you want to extend something like a button, you have a native HTML button, you want to create a specialized version of your HTML button. So there is a common way to extend native HTML elements and even reuse someone else's and make them reusable. So that's the advantage. And since they're just like regular HTML elements, they are composable, and you can even use your particular element in someone else's project, or someone else can get your element and use it in their project. It's that flexible and modularized and declarative. Next one is templates, which provides like native client-side templating. So like the engineers of different browser vendors and all, they just came together and they observed, hey, we need this kind of a templating we have been using it in different frameworks and all. So why not just make it as a part of the platform? So this is template, which provides the native client-side templating. And on the right, we see an example. So it has a div, and it has an image and has a script tag. So the thing about templates is like the image is not rendered until and unless you just use that template, or you stamp out the contents of the template and use it somewhere, or even the HTTP requests are not made unless and until the template is loaded and it is being used. So it's fast, and but the content is all inert unless till the time you are actually stamping out the contents. The next one is Shadow DOM, which provides like DOM and CSS scoping. So better than explaining this, it's easier to just see this and see what exactly Shadow DOM is. So let us take an example of like the HTML5 video tag, and you say video, you give the source, say foo.web, and just mention an attribute, say controls. When you use something like this, you see a window with the video, and you see a list of controls at the bottom over here. So one might wonder, like, how did the controls just come up? You did not even use any HTML or extra JavaScript or CSS to write this. But how did those controls appear? So the thing is, they're actually Shadow DOM. And if you just check out the source for this and enable like user agent Shadow DOM setting, you will just see like a set of divs, and you see a set of input elements, and they're just stylized in a particular manner to get these controls over here. So we see like we have been using Shadow DOM since a while, but we just didn't realize it. So and even like since they're stylized in a particular way, when you're using the video tag, you don't need to worry about the CSS of these input elements or these divs getting mixed up or getting messed up with the CSS of any other element on the div or any other div on the page. So it's like the CSS of the elements inside the shadow DOM. It is restricted and it is well encapsulated and well sealed inside that particular element. So that's the beauty of Shadow DOM. And HTML imports, it is basically used for loading some custom elements that you want. Like say I'm developing. Sorry.
I'm just sorry. You went pretty quickly over that last piece of the Shadow DOM.
Yeah.
It sounded like you said that your CSS couldn't affect it. Is that?
Yeah, like if there is a shadow root and it is having some contents inside it, the CSS is completely scoped. So if you have some elements inside it and these are using some style classes, it won't bleed out. The CSS won't bleed out of the shadow DOM boundaries. So it is restricted to this shadow root, and this set is like it's like a separate document fragment on its own. So yeah, does it answer your question?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. So let us continue. So we have HTML imports. It is basically used for importing custom elements. Say if you are developing your new web app or creating your own custom element, and you decide, hey, I want this custom element that has been developed by say XYZ person, and so all you need to do is like just import it. So the best way to explain this thing is it's like the hash include for the web. So similar to in C++ or Java, you use hash include or you use import to import a particular package or a particular file. Similarly, in web components world, you use HTML imports to just import a particular web component's definition and start using it in your custom element. So let us take this example of Twitter Bootstrap. And in order to use Bootstrap, you need to load a set of dependencies. You have some CSS files, you have some JavaScript files, and they need to be loaded in a particular order in order to get that working. So now if someone is new to Bootstrap, he might not be able to figure out like they need to be in a particular order or something. And he might just mess up, like just include bootstrap.js before jquery.js or just change the order of the CSS files. And it will basically give him some error or it will be a waste of time for him. So it will be great if someone can bundle up this set of dependencies in this particular order and he can just use that. So if we have a file, say bootstrap.html, and it includes all these dependencies, and then if someone just imports this HTML file using HTML import, then he does not need to worry about how exactly it is loaded and what are the set of dependencies that are supposed to be used for loading Bootstrap. So he just needs to import like one particular file. So but then thinking like that, like if you just imagine if you have a custom element and it is using like 10 other custom elements, you might think like it makes like a ton of HTTP requests when you want to use them. So you don't need to worry about it because we have a tool called as Vulcanize. So what Vulcanize does is it just goes and gets all the dependencies or the HTML imports that your particular component is making or the app is making, and it will just concatenate all those dependencies into one particular file and import that file. So that it reduces the number of calls we make to the server. So it will just get all those imports just and bring them as one particular file. But if you're not interested in command line or something, you can even use something like grunt vulcanize or gulp vulcanize and even make it a part of your build process and just forget about it. So just to summarize, we have four things. We have custom elements, which allows us to create and extend native elements or existing custom HTML elements. We have templates which provide native client-side templating in the browser. Shadow DOM, which provides for scoped CSS and encapsulated HTML or markup. And we have HTML imports, which allows us to load custom element definitions and resources. So how do we find elements? So if you know, like, okay, I want to use someone else's element, say like a toolbar or say icon, or some kind of a button. So customelements.io is a registry for finding web components. So you just search for it and you go and install those dependencies using Bower. So for the ones who don't know about Bower, Bower is basically a package manager which allows us to manage the dependencies of your particular app or your custom element. So it has a dependencies section, and if your custom element is having a bower.json file, and if someone wants to use your or if someone like just imports your custom element, then Bower will basically just go and install the dependencies automatically. Someone else doesn't need to sit and worry about what are the dependencies are and how he needs to import and where to find it. Bower will take care of itself. And once you have all those dependencies in your project, you basically just import what you want. Like you want to use a toolbar or icon button, just import them and start using them. That's it. And say we are constructing a toolbar over here. So just say core toolbar and just give the contents of the toolbar, and the toolbar will take care of laying all the elements in whatever way we want. So we have some icon, so we have a set of elements that we have, and I'll go over a few of them in the next couple of slides and explain how exactly this is working. But yeah, this is how you can start composing elements, get different elements, start mashing them up, and create whatever cool thing you want. So what is the browser support for this web component standard? It has been supported in Chrome since version 36, and since Opera is just a fork of Blink, like Blink is just the rendering engine which Chrome uses. Since Opera is just a fork of Blink, even Opera gets all those web components for free, and it has the native support as well. Firefox is having the template support for templates natively, and we also have Firefox Nightly, which is having support for all the web component standard. Safari 8 is having supports for templates, and for IE especially, like the Polymer team is in talks with the IE team in Microsoft, and they are actively communicating, and hope we just come up. They have like the native support for web components pretty soon. So then, after looking at this, one might think that oh, the web components are not supported natively in all browser, and then why should I even use them if it is not supported natively? But it's not the case. Like this is where Polymer comes in. The job of Polymer is to do two things. So first of all, it polyfills web components with web components.js. So earlier it was called as platform.js, but starting version 0.5.1 of Polymer, it is renamed to web components.js. So by polyfilling, what it does is, if there is some browser which is not having support for a particular standard, it will just sneak those features in by some additional JavaScript, and yeah, there you go. You just have the support for that particular web component standard on all the browsers. So, and it also, the second thing it does, it adds some syntactic sugar using polymer.js. So web components is basically just like the standards, but Polymer is giving like an opinionated way of how to use those standards or how to bind them together. Makes it easier to just interact with web components and even efficient as well. So as I mentioned earlier, like the browser support for without Polymer looks something like this. But once you use Polymer and once you are using the polyfills that Polymer provides, it looks like this. So you can use these web components on any browser, any modern browser that you want. So the reason for doing this polyfilling is like they didn't want to wait until the web component standard is implemented natively in all browsers. So with the polyfill, like developers can just start using it and give feedback to the standards team, and we can incorporate changes to them as soon as possible. So by the sugaring, let us see like how Polymer helps in sugaring web components. And it's Polymer is basically it's a layer and it sits on top of web components. So you have your browser, then on top of that there's a layer for the web component standard. You have the polyfills, and on top of that you have Polymer. So as I said, like Chrome is not having the native support. Chrome is having the native support for web components. So you don't need to polyfill. You don't need web components.js. You can directly start using Polymer and all the good features that it has. But even it's not mandatory that you use Polymer. You can even use the web components even without using Polymer. It's just like an optional additional layer on top of it. So let us see custom elements. So on top I'll show like how you would use web components like without Polymer, and then we'll see how Polymer can add value, and finally we'll see how to use it. So in vanilla web components, if you want to register a particular element, so you just use document.register element, you pass in the name of your custom element and send the prototype of whatever element you're trying to extend. So this is how you do it with like the vanilla web components. With Polymer, it's different. The Polymer team has created a web component which allows us to create a web component. So that's kind of meta. So you just say Polymer element, passing the name, and you don't need to worry about passing the prototype, and the Polymer element will automatically take care of setting up the prototype chain for you. Another important thing to note over here is like when you are creating a custom element, it needs to adhere to a naming convention. It always needs to have a dash between the names. So when you are creating paper tabs, you just say paper hyphen tabs. So this is there are two purposes of doing this. First of all, it signals to the browser that we are creating a custom element, and secondly, it future-proofs us from the future versions of HTML. Say next time, say HTML7, say it comes up with an element called as tabs, then we don't want to land up in a problem just because we created an element called as tabs right now and someone is using it. So using a hyphen just future-proofs us from the future versions of HTML. And to use it, you can use the custom element like any other HTML element out there. So you can use it declaratively, or you can use document.create element to create a particular element. And in order to extend it, just use document.create element. You pass in the prototype of whatever HTML element you are trying to extend, and just pass on the tag of that particular element. And with Polymer, it is super declarative. You use the Polymer element tag, pass in the name, and use the extends attributes. And you don't need to pass in the prototype and all these things over here. So as we can see over here, like without Polymer things, you need to write some JavaScript, but with Polymer, it is pretty declarative. And to use it, you just say button is a super button, wherein the button is the super button is the extended button, and this is just the native element. Or you can even use document.create element and pass button and super button. Let us see how to sugar templates. So without web components, you just have the template tag, and you provide some contents inside it. And in order to use those contents or just get them to life, you get the template and just stamp out the contents of the template using some JavaScript. The thing is, like, this template tag does not provide the data binding features like a library like mustache or handlebar would. But with Polymer, the template tag is much more powerful. It provides some additional capabilities to the template in addition to just providing the things of a regular template. You can use template repeat, wherein if you have a list of items, you can just iterate over the list of items and say just access the properties of a particular item using template repeat. You can have conditional templates wherein you can bind a particular template if and only if a particular condition is true. You can write expressions inside it, and you can use all these data binding features. So whenever you use Polymer, you get two-way data binding for the particular element. And let us see shadow DOM. So if you want to create a shadow root using, if you want to use shadow DOM in without Polymer, you get an element, and if you want to assign a shadow root to that particular element, you just say element.create shadow root, and just assign some markup to the shadow DOM, and or even you can stamp out the contents of a particular template and assign it to the shadow DOM explicitly. But with Polymer, things are easier. So what the Polymer team has done is, if you're creating a custom element, and it needs to have a template tag, and whatever are the contents of the template, they automatically become the contents of the shadow DOM when you're using that particular custom element. Say if you're using this thing like profile card, so this H2 will automatically get added to the shadow DOM of profile card, and profile card will become the shadow root by default. So that's pretty declarative, and you don't need to write any additional JavaScript to make that happen. So like this is how like Polymer provides like additional sugaring for web components. And like for the code labs, I thought it will be like good if I can give some resources for you know, for referring. So this is a link which refers to the Polymer basics, and it just provides some information on how you can set up Bower and how you can set up Polymer. But you don't need to go through the starting point right now. You can just read through it, and it just provides some additional information on what are the features of Polymer. You have data binding, or you have event handling, you have node finding, automatic node finding, and so you can refer to this thing, and it is also having some good examples over here. Say if you want to understand this example, you can play around. There are some edit on Plunker buttons, and it will take you to Plunker, and you can edit it in whatever way you want in order to understand it better. So this is a good starting point for learning Polymer, and just playing around and getting some hands-on even before you start creating your first element. So that's a useful resource. And yeah, so that was Polymer. And there are additional links which you can refer to for learning Polymer. You have polymerproject.org. It has nice documentation on the different web component standards and even Polymer. And it also has some icon sets that have been developed by Google. And webcomponents.org, it's like a one-stop shop. You have some nice articles giving the best practices, and you have the browser support and all the information in one place. So let's move on to the second section, components. So say when we know like we have all these technologies or all these standards at our disposal, we have custom elements, we have all these ways to sugar them and all. We can imagine like it will be adding like so much of power to our HTML. And what if we imagine our HTML, like the native HTML looked something like this, and you have all these smart tags which you can use in your page, and they're completely interoperable. You can drop them off in any framework and just make them make it work. So, and if you imagine like thinking like if we have this set of particular tags, and what if we just designed HTML like round up starting now, and using all the mobile web app development experience that we have, what will we basically come up with? It will be so easy to develop an app for the mobile web, isn't it? So this is an example. Say if you want to develop an app, something like this, you have a map, you have something to search, and some information over here, some ratings down at the bottom. So if you have these custom elements that have already been developed by someone, or if you have developed some elements, you can just bolt them up together. You can use a core icon for representing this icon. You can use some element like a core field over here. You have a core drawer panel which will make your site responsive, and you can use it on a phone or a tablet. and you just need to bolt these pieces together. You use a core icon, or maybe if you want to use make some calls to the server, you use core Ajax. You want to use an icon, just use core icon or someone else's element, and just start developing your app without writing like a ton of CSS and JavaScript. So that's pretty cool. And since like these elements, they are completely sealed and they have like a defined interface to interact with them, you don't need to worry about the CSS of this core icon mingling up with the CSS of this field or this drawer panel. Since it is using shadow DOM internally, like the CSS is scoped, and you can very well use all these different elements in one app together. And so in order to jumpstart this process, Google has developed two sets of elements. First one is core elements. They're like the scaffolding of your application or the bedrock of your application. They're not like very stylized elements, but they provide like some additional functionality to your application, which is like very useful, or it can lay out the basic the structure of your web app or something. So the first one is core toolbar. So we have many apps which use like a toolbar. Almost every of our app has a toolbar. So it's a basic container for controls. And if you want to just use a toolbar in a project, use just import core toolbar and start using it. You use core toolbar and just mention the contents of that. So in this case, we are just having a div which lists some title. So you use core toolbar and just mention the div along with the content that you want. And say you are in some other project, you want to use that same toolbar web component, but have some additional icons with it. So you can just use the same toolbar and just throw in some icons and some divs, and it will take care of rendering them on the toolbar. The next one is core header panel. So a smart way of using the toolbar is to use it with the core header panel. So the core header panel actually manages the scrolling behavior of your page. So it has two sections. One is the header section, which of which you can control the behavior. So your toolbar can be the header section, and the second section can be content. And how you can manage is like you can tell to the core header panel if you want the toolbar to scroll up with your page, or you just want to make it pinned to that particular page. So you can just customize the behavior, and here you can see like the toolbar is just pinned to the page while we are scrolling the page. Or you can even specify a more attribute to it so that it just scrolls off whenever you are scrolling the page. So these elements are very customizable, and you can use them in any of your projects. And as I mentioned earlier, it's important that our app is responsive. So they also have an element called as core drawer panel, which is a responsive container, and it has two sections. It has a drawer section and it has the main section. So the drawer panel is it acts as a side panel, and the main panel is actually it holds your main content. And say if you want to use it in your project, and say you just need to develop it on one particular client, and say if you have a smaller screen size, the drawer panel will automatically slide back in, and you have some facility by which you can slide it in or get it back out, and the user can basically just focus on the main content. And but if you have a laptop, you can specify a particular width with which it should automatically scroll the drawer panel inside. So, and if it is within that particular width, it will show the drawer panel and main panel together. And you don't need to worry about it being responsive or anything. The core header panel will automatically take care of doing that. The next set of elements is the paper elements. So these, so if you heard about material design in the Google I/O this year, they introduced this concept of material design, and they're adhering to this UX concept. And these elements are based on the principle of material design. So they have a couple of elements, and so here is a paper input element, which is like a special kind of an input box. as the name suggested, we can give user input, and you, you can specify the label. It can automatically do the validation for you based on some particular regular expression, and if the validation fails or something, it can throw an error, and you can customize all that for your project based on these attributes. And it has a floating level, so whenever you click that particular input box, the label will basically just slide up, and it gives a very nice effect. You don't need to worry how exactly it is being done or something like that. You just use the input field and you get all that for free. Then you have paper checkbox, which provides these nice ink-like effects. So whenever you click, you have these nice animations. You have this ink effect, and whenever you're using it on a touch device, the user will get like a nice feedback after he uses this. Like if you have your own element and you want to get that ink effect in it, you can use a paper ripple and just use this paper ripple element, and that's it. You have the ink effect in any of your element for free. You don't need to worry about how it is implemented. And if you use the fit attribute, it will just spread out towards the entire contents of that particular element or the container. And we have shadow. Like sometimes we need to use a shadow for displaying a particular element, and it gives a nice effect, and you can use paper shadow just for achieving that. So one might not know like how to get that shadow. You might keep on experimenting with the CSS and all, but when you use this paper shadow, you can easily incorporate the shadows in your elements. And but since web components 5.1, like the syntax has been changed a little bit. You first use shadow, and inside that you use the whatever thing you want to add the shadow to. But with this, like these elements basically come with their own set of styling. And what if you want to use all these elements, these paper elements, and you want to theme them according to your project, and you want to add your own style or something like that? How do you do that? So we have selectors that have been added. Like we have two selectors. We have the shadow selector. Say if you want to change the behavior of or the color of this particular circle over here when it is being dragged. So you can use a paper slider and just use the shadow selector to get hold of the circle and change the CSS. So these selectors allow you to pierce through the shadow DOM boundaries and get hold of the CSS, and you can change it in whatever way you want. Or you even have the deep selector, which you can use to pierce through all the boundaries of the custom elements which adhere to this particular expression. Say you want to change the color of all the ripples, then just use this syntax and it will change the color of all your ripples for all the elements. You don't need to sit and change the color of all the elements, or just get hold of every element one by one. So using shadow and deep, it's a good way to theme all your entire site in whatever way you want. So this is an example which Eric Weidelman has put together, which shows how you can theme your site. So you have a little toggle button over here, and based on that, it is changing the colors on the right. So it is making sure automatically when you use green, everything automatically changes to green, and similarly for purple. And Google is having, they have developed their flagship app using just the core elements and paper elements. It is called as Topeka, and it is like a fun little quiz game. You can just go to the site and just play around with it. And it has just been developed using core and paper elements. We have polymerproject.org, which I just mentioned about some time back. It is also built on web components and Polymer, and it's not like it's just Google who is developing that. There are even Mozilla is doing it. So Mozilla has developed some set of elements which they have themed specifically to suit the color scheme of the Firefox OS. So they have something like a break app bar which you have at the top. Then you have like a content deck in the middle, and you have a tab bar. So in order to implement this, they have used the core icon set from what Google has made, and they have used this X Instagram tag which has been made by Adi Osmani. So we see like they have just mashed up different elements and they have styled them in a particular way in order to come up with their own icon set. So they can. So we see that they can work together. Here is an app that has been developed by Rob Dodson. It's an app which gives you the tour of San Francisco. You have different destinations. You can select one, and when you click that, you can just go to the particular. You can see some photos of that particular destination. So it's a simple app, and it's not just browser makers like Google or Mozilla who is doing it. There are even individuals who are contributing to the list of web components, and so here is an app router which has been developed by Eric Ringsmith, and it you can use this to react to the changes of your link or your href. Say you want to change your view or do something in your element or your app, then you can use this app router for doing that. Yeah, this is a page ER element that has been developed by Adi Osmani, which provides pagination. You just provide some items to it and say like how many items you should display per page, and that's it. It will go around and paginate all those items, and you can use it in your app for free. You don't need to sit and worry of how you paginate that and all. And this is an Ajax form. It's like an extension of a regular form. It just it is additional. It is having additional Ajax features. So you need to adhere to just some particular things for using Ajax form. Like every field needs to have like a name and a value field, and whenever you submit this form, it will automatically send an Ajax request to the server, and without even refreshing the form or page, you have your task done and you have your form submitted to the server. So these are some elements. There are apps that have been developed using web components and Polymer as well. So you have polymerproject.org. You have chromestatus.com, where almost everything you see on this page is being developed using web components and Polymer. So this is the designer tool that has been developed by the team who has developed the Chrome Dev Editor, and you have a palette over here which lists all the web components. You can just drag and drop them on this designer canvas, and you can customize the properties. But the thing is, it's not like an IDE or anything. It's just developed by them out of their interest and curiosity. So you can play around with this. It's at polymerproject.org/tool/designer. And yeah, who is using this in production? GitHub is using it. So all these tags over here, like all these timestamps, they're all local time custom HTML elements. So what's special about this is they have developed this thing just using the custom elements polyfill, and they have not at all used Polymer in order to have the support for web components in their site. And Salesforce have developed a mobile SDK kit, and it has a set of custom elements, and you can use them. And they also have elements by which you can connect to the Salesforce backend, and you can just use that element in your app, and you don't need to worry of how to connect to the Salesforce backend at all. So there are like this gives us a lot of opportunity to actually develop our own custom elements. Maybe you will be starting to have ideas of what you can have as elements, and you can have like APIs as elements as well. Say you want to there's so many APIs out there which you can wrap up under and make them as a custom element, and just have some public properties and public methods which you can expose on that particular element. So let us show an example. Let us take the example of a Google map, and say you want to simply add a marker to a map. So just as an estimate, how much lines of code will it be? If I want to develop something like this, I need to understand what Google Map is, like how exactly you need to get a Google Map. You need to understand the Google Maps API, and so on and so forth. So just to mention, like this is just some code that you need to show, you need to write just to show like one map marker on your page. So this is like a lot of boilerplate code, and it will be great if we can wrap up this thing into a Google Maps custom element, and anyone can use it in their app and be super declarative. You don't need to worry about what exactly it does behind the background. So you have just a tag like this. You say Google Map, and yeah, that's it. It will get a map for you. You can specify the attributes, you can specify the latitude, longitude, and you can specify the zoom level, and Google Map will take care of centering that particular map around that location, and you don't need to worry about how it does that. And yeah, you can show a map marker by just adding a Google Map marker, passing the latitude and longitude, and yeah, you have the map marker over there. And you can customize it in whatever way you want. You can maybe specify some image that you want to display in place of that marker. Yeah, that's super cool. And so Google has started converting their APIs into custom elements. They have elements for Google Analytics, Calendar, Google Drive, and so on. Like even we can sit and start take some interesting API and convert it into an HTML element, and who knows, maybe someone might enjoy using it. And if you want to learn more about it, Eric Badelman has put forth a video. You can just go check that out. And yeah, so how can we can just get started on this? So there is a lot of stuff to learn, and so many like we have these web component standards. We have Polymer. We have these features that Polymer is providing. So we need to start learning. Like there are some good resources, as I mentioned, like webcomponents.org or Polymer project. You can use them to get up to speed with them. And Rob Dodson has started a series on YouTube. It is called as Polycast, and it gives like how to use the core icon set and how to use the icons, like the core elements and the paper elements that Google has developed. So you can definitely check that out. It's pretty cool. I've checked like a few videos of him. And then you start building. So you have all this knowledge, and you have different tools, and you can use your Polymer, which is used for initially scaffolding your entire app. Say you go to some hackathon and you don't know like what should be the structure of a Polymer app. This is just a tool which will scaffold out the initial app structure for you. But in case you don't want to just start with a full-fledged app just yet, you can start with a seed element which has been developed by Adi Osmani, and it basically gives how a simple custom element should be structured. So you can refer to this link, and you can just post that and get it in your project when you are going to do the code labs in the afternoon. And even he has a video explaining how to use the seed element. And we have the Chrome Dev Editor. So we will be using this in the afternoon sessions, and you can use this to create some custom element, and it has support for Bower, for just Bower installing a particular component. And it's very cool. It has a package manager. You can set up you can use the dev server which comes inside it, so you don't need to worry about setting up your environment. It's pretty easy to get started with it. And last but not the least, you need to share. Like if you develop some custom element, you find it interesting, or if you think someone else can reuse your element, just share. As I mentioned, like custom elements is a repository for all these elements. You can even upload it to Component Kitchen. So these are the two repositories which has the custom elements. And how to do that is basically just get your Bower JSON, add the keyword like web-components, and whenever you register your element using Bower, it will automatically appear in the custom elements.io site. And yeah, there's a lot to explore in this. Like this is still new, and this is like a whole lot of thing which is being added to the browsers now, and it's up to us like how much we explore, how much we create like the APIs. There's still like a lot of work done on how to improve on the different aspects of this, and the more we learn, the more we can give feedback to the community. And yeah, with this, I'd like to conclude my talk. And I'd like to thank Rob Dodson and Eric Bidelman. So these are developer advocates from Google, and Rob has actually put for the presentation material for this, and he has been a great resource and help. And yeah, so thank you so much for attending. Thanks for all your patience. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Amrita. We'll be going, I mean, that's a ton of material that she just powered through there. I know I learned a lot. We'll be going into things in more detail later, but we can take a few questions now if anyone have questions on that presentation.
Can you slide the podium over to the left because it blocks the screen from this side?
Okay, we'll do that before the next talk. That was a request, not a question, but any questions or other requests?
Just we can take up a few questions. Like it's already.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just about this afternoon, you mentioned 3 or 4 strategies about going to the sessions. And
Yeah.
For instance, using Go or doing Chrome dev. Is there a way that you know, we can find out about that a little bit more to make sure we?
Yeah, I can help you out in setting that up in the afternoon. And if anyone wants to like get up to speed with the Polymer basics as well, or how to use the basic features of Polymer, I can help that out. Thanks.
Is it easy to mix and match web components with, say, existing frameworks that we have already?
Yes, very much. Like since like these custom elements that you develop, they are just an extension of the HTML's vocabulary, and they're just based on HTML. So any framework out there who knows how to manipulate a DOM or understands HTML can easily use these custom elements.
Hey, first of all, I'm new to Polymer, and I think you did a really great job of giving an overview and explaining it.
Thank you.
My question as an Angular guy is, it seems like some of the features like two-way data binding, routing, and the things you mentioned sort of solve the problems that Angular solves in a different way. So I was wondering if you could talk some more about kind of how they would sort of play nicely together.
Sure, that's a great question. And we have a follow-up talk on Angular and Polymer and how you can use Angular and Polymer. And Sunny will be presenting the talk, and it will definitely give you a lot of information on how you use the both of them together.
I think the routing component you showed was that Google, or was that
Sorry, which component?
was that the routing component?
Oh yeah, no, it's just developed by
that part of
it's
that's not
Google.
part of Polymer.
Yeah.
Right, beginner to Polymer. So quick question about like when you import the HTML5 file into your actual file, does that HTML file exist locally?
Yeah,
so you would have downloaded it.
Yeah, because like when you use Bower, if you say what you want to use someone else's component, you just use Bower, and what Bower does is it gets all the dependencies and all those files in the whatever component you want to install. And say if it is having like 2 JavaScript files, 1 HTML file, and 1 CSS file, when you Bower install a component, it will go and get all those files and install it in your Bower components directory in your app.
Oh, okay, so
you have them locally
on your project, right? In that directory, right?
You will have them in your directory, and you just need to specify the path to that particular component in order to import it.
Okay, thank you very much, Amrita.
Thank you.
So just a couple of other housekeeping things, which I should have mentioned to start with. Bathrooms are over in that corner, so across the elevator lobby and to the right. There's signs with the codes on them. They have little numeric codes that you have to use to unlock the door. There are signs out in the lobby, but there's also, if you look just to the left of the door as you go out of this space, they're there as well. The other thing I forgot to do was thank the other groups that are helping us organize this, both the AngularJS meetup and the HTML5 meetup. Were great help in cross-promoting this and helping us organize the talk, finding speakers and stuff. So we want to definitely thank them. A lot of you guys probably met one of my other co-organizers down in the lobby, Praveen. Praveen helps run GDG Boston and was unfortunately stranded down there letting you guys in as we were kicking things off today. So our next speaker is Sam Dowd, who's going to be talking. He's going to be doing a little bit more hands-on. So we're going to do a code lab and look at designing a mobile website using the paper elements.
Just break it up, or just go. Just go. All right.
You got HDMI on there, or?
Yes.
Okay. So the other side, we do have like adapters for okay. And so people that are standing in the back, there is some room, along the sides here. Viewing angles aren't great. Also, if there are chairs that you see in the middle, fill in. I'll leave it to Sam.
Yeah.
So real quick, while I'm getting set up, can I get an idea of what the sort of level of experience is in the room? So how many of you have never used Polymer before? Fantastic. That makes my job so much easier. Okay.
Please slide the podium to the left.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry. Why don't you grab your laptop and I'll slide. We're probably just blocking a different set of people now. So
Do you want to try and move it back?
Can you push it back? Yeah.
And then, you're still on the camera.
I am? Yep. You're fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see how that works for me. So how many of you have some experience with Polymer beyond just what Amruta talked about? Okay. And experts?
No.
Nice. This is perfect. So a little bit about me before I really get started. Can you just flip that over to have me presenting, just on the Hangout on Air there?
Click on me. Do you know how to do it?
So it's my icon in the bottom right, just to present to everyone.
This one. No.
Maybe I can do it.
Yeah.
I think that works. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So a couple of things before we start. I am by no means an engineer. So when we got together for the first time to talk about the event, I was looking for some motivation to learn Polymer. And so when they offered to have somebody do the code labs, I said, sure. And so if any of you are looking to learn technology, volunteering to do a presentation in front of 100 people is a great way to motivate yourself to do that. I'm glad that Amruta mentioned the Chrome Dev Editor, because that's primarily what I'll be using to do this. So I'm a product manager at McGraw-Hill Education. I'm on the analytics team, and one of my motivations for starting to even just learn coding was to understand some of the language that my developers spoke. We have server side, we have front end, and luckily as I was starting this, they started to use Angular, and so some of the language is similar and some of the concepts are similar. so I was fortunate to that they were going in a similar direction as I was. The other benefit that that Polymer provides to somebody who's just learning is that it seems relatively future-proof. This seems to be, even at least the web components or modular and componentized, seems to be a pretty consistent theme. And so learning Polymer and therefore understanding that idea of components has been a pretty good choice. A sort of preview as I go through this, given that I'm not an engineer and have just sort of worked my way through the tutorial, I may not use all of the right terminology, and I look forward to being corrected afterwards. But I'll also be focusing more on what each item does rather than the technical reasons behind it, which will to understanding Polymer in the end. So the Code Lab starts out on the Hackfest website. And so I think it's hackademic.com. And if any of you are interested in following along, what the tutorial has you do is we'll be building a material design mobile web app with paper elements. And we'll probably get through step 5. That's the sort of limit of my expertise. But I think later on in the afternoon when we do some work and hacking together, I think we can probably work through more. So one of the things that I did like about the Chrome Dev Editor is that it helps you set up a project really easily. So as I'm starting out here, there's the menu in the top left. How well can you guys see this at all? Oh, that does not look good. Great. So in the top left, there's this menu, and you can do new project. And they have a JavaScript web app using Polymer elements already there. And so you would just name the project, in this case, Polymer Mobile Code Lab. And it actually doesn't create the project that you're going to start with. So as we get going, we're actually going to erase everything and replace it with what the instructions have. So to go through this, I'm actually just going to sort of walk you through the page. I decided, I was going to put slides together, and then I was just sort of copying and pasting the tutorial. So I figured I would go with this. So when you initially create the project using the template from the Chrome Dev Editor, you have Bower components already. You have the Bower JSON, index.html, main.js, and styles.css. As we go along and as we get towards the more complex steps, I think we add maybe 1 or 2 files to that structure. So it's really not a complex structure. One of the features of Chrome Dev Editor is once you have your Bower file set up, you can actually just right-click and do a Bower update, and it just reads the Bower file and adds them all to your Bower components folder. As someone who discovered Bower just a little while ago and was doing it through the command line, this is really, really great. It takes away some of the cryptic errors that I got in the terminal. So now that you have, it actually fires up as this app here. And we get rid of this on the next page. So Amruta did a great job showing the core elements, the paper elements. One of the really helpful sites that I worked with was the documentation. Google has put together some really great documentation, which actually shows you the elements. So it'll help you. It'll demo what each one does. It shows you some of the. In this case, I had to sort of go through it slowly so I didn't overwhelm myself. Here it is. But so these are all the core elements. So one of the elements that we'll be using is the core header panel, which I think Amrita showed. But for example, so it shows you what sort of sample code looks like. It shows you some of the possibilities for CSS. It shows you the attributes, the properties, the events. And then you can also go to the demo, and it gives you an idea of what some of those attributes will do. So this is actually really helpful, especially because it bundles some really nice effects into the element. So the first thing to do is to add some of our dependencies to the Bower file. So the two that Google has us do right now is the core elements and the Roboto font. So we'll go into our Bower file. I didn't do what I wanted to do. I don't think that's a feature that they've implemented yet, so I can't really zoom. But you would go into your Bower file, and in this case, you would add core elements, paper elements, and the fonts. One thing that I, being somewhat novice, forgot the comma at the end. And so that caused about a half hour of troubleshooting, not being able to figure out what I was doing. Luckily, there is a GitHub project with the final product, which I use several times to cheat. It's usually why I get stuck at step 5. So after that, we're going to create, so we've already replaced what was in index.html. So in the tutorial, we're going to create code-app.html, which is right here. And as I was doing it myself, it was actually really helpful to type everything in, but for the sake of the demo, I'll be copying and pasting. So what you have is, so you're naming the element here, and so that's how you'll import the element into your index file. And then you start off with a template element. You would link to the CSS, and it's just to show you, it's just hello Polymer for now. And there's a script that we'll fill in later, and then you close the element. For the CSS, we're just going to add one line at the bottom for the font, which starts off with the Roboto and falls back on the usual ones. All right, so here's the index file. And the first time that I tried to use Polymer without going through a tutorial, I missed the concept of imports. So for each element that you're using, this doesn't necessarily apply to the index, but when you're putting the code lab HTML together, and you guys will see this as we go through, each element that you use has to be imported at the top of the HTML file. And presumably those are in your Bower components folder. Similarly, when you get into the index HTML, you want to import your code lab, or in this case, code-lab.html file. And then you just use, so there's one element codelab-app in your index file. That's it. And so with the ease of Chrome Dev Editor, I can press play and run the app. And that's the app. As it exists right now, it just says Hello Polymer. But as you can see in the console, or not see, when I go to Elements, so you see all of the imports, and these are from the CodeLab app. These are not included in the index, but they are in the CodeLab HTML. And then in the CodeLab HTML, you actually do get to see the HTML file there. And so this will come in handy later when we need to look for something. Okay. So that's step 2 of sort of getting your basic Polymer setup ready. Next, we're going to move on to step 3, which is the exciting part. In this case, we're going to use one of the core elements. So we're going to start with the core drawer panel. And if we're going to do that, we want to make sure that we bring in and we import all of the elements that we're going to use. In this case, core drawer panel HTML, header panel HTML, and toolbar HTML. And again, that documentation for each of those exists here. And next, we'll just set up some of the top level elements for our app. One of the things I really, really like about Polymer is the responsive attributes, which you can set just right up in the, in this case, the core drawer panel. And we'll go into that in a few minutes when we look at the actual app. So we're going to add the core header panel, and we're going to indicate that it's going to be drawer, which is on the left, and then the core header panel that's on main. So if we look at the core header panel, let's see. It helps, so you can use the layout attributes that Polymer has standard. In this case, it's using the flex, but you can use the layout attributes just right in the element. So here, I really wish I could zoom, I apologize. We've set up the core header panel as a drawer. We've added a core toolbar with just a title of menu, and then we closed it. Then we added another one that's core header panel main, then another toolbar. On the toolbar, we put a paper icon button, and so that's why we've added the HTML import here, again in our Bower components. This span here that has flex is another part of the layout attributes. And the flex attribute causes the span to take up all available space and push the icons to the right of the toolbar. And again, if you're looking for documentation on the flex, it's part of the layout attributes. In core header panel main, again, we have a couple of buttons. We have the text, my notes. In this case, we've added the span. And then we've just added some CSS. In this case, we're looking at the layout attribute that we've set. So we're differentiating between drawer and main for the header panel. So we can set the CSS separately for them. And so this is what the basic scaffold looks like for the app. And so another thing to remember is that you're going to run the app from the index.html file, not the CodeLab app HTML. So the app fills, you see the result of the flex over here. You have my notes. We'll go into that a little bit later. You also notice that the interaction is already built in. So you can see the circle there as I click on anything. One thing you'll notice, though, if I look at this on a phone, is that the drawer is closed. So it defaults as closed on a mobile, and clicking the icon that would normally open it up doesn't do anything. So that's the next step, opening a drawer. So the first thing that we're going to do is we add the ID attribute to the core drawer panel. So in this case, the core drawer panel is right at the top. So we add the ID attribute, we call it drawer panel. And this is where we're going to get into some of the JavaScript included in Polymer. So one thing that you might want to think about when you're typically writing HTML, it's important that the ID attribute be unique. With Polymer, you don't necessarily need to worry about that. Your ID attributes need to be unique within each element. So if you have and I guess that's in your index file essentially. So if I have CodeLab app.html as my main element, right? Of course, in that file, all the IDs need to be unique. But when I put them at the top level index.html, I can have some of the same attributes as long as they're in separate HTML files. So Polymer provides a convenience method, which is this.$myIDname. And so this is how we'll use and reference drawer panel in the script tag. And so this will find the child element inside of a Polymer element by ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an on-click listener to the paper icon button. Notice again, I don't think I went over this, but and I actually think this changed. For any of you really following Polymer, I noticed some people whining on Google Plus this morning. Google has changed it a little bit to remove the icon attribute and actually move it into its own element, I believe is what they did. They haven't updated their tutorial, so we're going to go with this for now. So we're going to add the on-click listener. In this case, it's right here, inside the core toolbar on the main header panel. So this note here about why on dash click and why not on click, Polymer supports declarative binding of events. So it uses the special on dash event syntax to trigger the binding behavior. So it does use part of its declarative nature with the events as well. Next, we have to add the toggle drawer method down in the script so that it actually does something with the on-click listener. So we'll take this handy example here and add it right down here. And what that should do for us is when we're looking at our app on a mobile device and the drawer is toggled off by default, we can actually now turn it on. Awesome. So if I This is my favorite feature. If I press play, it runs the app, it opens it. I think that's a step further. Ignore that. So obviously there's nothing here, but when I open it up on a phone, drawer is closed, and now it opens. And for somebody who's just learning, that is far more simple than I probably ever would have found learning JavaScript from scratch. That could be dangerous, and that could be good. Now I just don't have to learn JavaScript, I guess. Or at least the complex JavaScript. So go back to CodeLab, app HTML. So the next step is using paper elements. So what we're going to try to do at this point is add a note. So right now we have all phones. We have something that says my notes, but we don't actually have the ability to write notes, except for the fact that that exists. So we're going to go back to our CodeLab app HTML. And this, as you can see, is where things get fun. So we've added the floating action button. That's what the plus sign is. And that's going to add a new note. We're going to add a paper input field to define the note's body. And then we're going to add a list data structure to keep track of added notes in the root element. So once we get into the code, or back into the CodeLab app HTML, we're going to add, of course, the paper fab import, because that's one of the Polymer elements we're going to be using. And then because we're using it, we need to declare it in the HTML file. And again, this is another area where the attributes are helpful. I'm not sure if I actually don't think that this will continue to exist, so enjoy it while it lasts. And then we're also going to add another on-click listener, which is going to help us show the new note input, and we'll close the element. And this is all within the core toolbar, within the core header panel main, which I have to say is the declarative nature is really, really great. Because I could use classes and IDs, but this is really, really nice to tell me what I'm actually looking at and dealing with. I'm also going to add the paper fab styles to the CSS. And as you can see, this this does take advantage of some of the material design. So I've added that here under what's already there. And then I'm going to add a div underneath all of what I've already put in there after the core toolbar. So, sorry, within the main header panel, but within the toolbar. I think that's where I messed up. See, sometimes people break things when they demo. I fix them. I think. So the div goes in, yeah, above the core drawer panel. And the div has the class content. Oh, still put that in the wrong place. Okay. And then we'll put in the paper input dependency and add the paper input element to the content div. In this case, I've already done it. That's what I moved. Okay. So we'll go back, take the import, add it there. And then in the new div, we're going to put the ID of new note input. One of the layout attributes is floating label. And we'll assign the label add a new note as a string to the attribute. And then we're going to use the, in the script, we're going to use the ready callback. And that's going to hide the input so that it doesn't show up right when you open the app. And then we're also going to do the show new note input as well, so that when you click on the button, it opens the new note. And I've already put this in. So these are here. So now we need to do is add the onChange event to the add callback. So we put those here. So these are still within the attributes of the paper input element. And we're going to add an empty array into the data, into the script down here. So keep in mind, this is all within the Polymer function. And that's something that was added when we created the project. So keep in mind that if you're writing it from scratch, to make sure that you're using the Polymer function to start. And then every time we create an object by clicking on the paper fab icon, the object that will be placed in the data array has two properties, body and done. And then we're going to add the add callback. And what this is going to do is this is going to actually put the data into the array. We're going to use the new note binding to retrieve the note body from the input. And then we're also going to clear and hide the input field afterwards. So this add function will go back into the dev editor, and it'll go right here. So what we should see when we open up the app again is we'll see the plus icon here, add a new note, and we should be able to click on the plus button. Add a new note will allow a text entry, and then we can save the note. So we'll open up index.html again. That's amazing. And then the note shows up here. We've already added the check mark as part of those steps. Going to uncheck and check, and it already has the interaction built in. I can switch over to take a look at this on a phone, on mobile. And again, the drawer starts closed, but we can still press on the plus button and add a note. And you still have the same interaction here. So I'm going to stop there, at least with the actually demoing the code. If you are interested in going a little bit further, and I did venture into this, I think adventure is definitely the right word. As you use the core local storage element, which allows you to store the notes locally. As you saw there, when I refreshed in the mobile view, they all went away. And so this allows you to use the core local storage element to save things in data, that array, the empty array that we created, add the new function and using the event. And then what will happen is you can create things, and when you refresh, they'll still be there. The next step is actually one of the cooler steps, and I wish I had some time to go through it, but this is adding settings and functions to the sidebar. So we can do fade out selected so that when something's checked, it fades out. We can delete an element, or sorry, a note. The slider, and so Amruta showed a lot of these functions in her presentation, but this is a toggle. This is just an icon that's already in the paper icons or the core icons library, I guess. And this will dynamically change the font size as you drag it. And then a reset button as well, which puts the settings all back to the way that we set them up originally. So don't notice the fact that I'm going into this directory. Okay. That's just in the wrong place. So these were notes that I added yesterday, but I can add a new note. Okay. If I select two of them, I can have them fade out, maybe. I can delete the ones that are checked. Again, I can change the font size, and I can reset to the original settings. We're going to switch over to the mobile view for the last step, and we're going to refresh. But our notes are still there in some, there we go. And I can expand the drawer again, and I can use all of the settings in the drawer as well. So I'm going to stop there. Are there questions? That's not possible.
Actually, I had a question while people are thinking of their questions. So I had a report of people hitting GitHub rate limits. Is anyone having issues with that? How many people? So
that's a known
issue.
Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So the workaround apparently is to set the Bower dependencies to master. I don't know if people have tried that. Has anyone successfully done that?
Actually, in the tutorial you showing, they have instructions to download a different zip file.
Okay, yeah, that's the other workaround is instead of using Bower, they have all the dependencies packaged up in a zip.
Master wasn't quite working for me. I don't know if it's because of dependencies or what.
Okay. All
Also,
right. So a better solution is probably to use that zip file that has all the dependencies zipped up in it. So apologies about that. If you know, as we're going through things, people get stuck in places like that, shout out, and we'll try and get things sorted out.
Yeah, there's another alternative, which is the command line when you Bower update dash capital F, it would automatically download everything from that stock the master.
Okay.
Yeah, is that limited to the Chrome Dev Editor? Or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Because it's using the API.
Right. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. And I'll put the step-by-step up to through step 5 on GitHub so you guys can see it. And I guess I'll post a link. I think we now have a Polymer group for Google+, so I'll post the link to that repo in there.
Actually, that might be members only. I don't know.
And I'll put it on the Boston.
Yeah, put it on the GDG Boston,
Cool.
I think. So great. So any questions on the code lab before we move on?
Awesome. Yes.
Oh, I was wondering what the toolbar you're using for the mobile testing is.
Oh, That's a great question. I think I can tell you later, but I was installing various, I don't think it's browser stack, but it might be.
Oh, that's the basic one.
Is it the basic one? So they've updated it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I didn't know that, so I thought that it was an extension that I installed, but actually, so they have updated it. That's cool. All right, great. Thanks
Thank you very
much.
Okay, our next speaker is Sonny Gleason, who's going to be talking about Polymer and AngularJS and how they play together.
Is this your power adapter? Or?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much.
Yes, we'll do this, guys.
Oh, and another thing I forgot. There's no end of things I forgot today. If you're tweeting about this, the hashtag is #it's academic. That way, if you follow that, you'll see all the other DevFest events for Polymer that are going on around the world or have recently.
Right on. So, can everyone see this okay? Can you hear me okay? Wave or throw something if you can't. Shout out if you need me to fix anything. So, I didn't know how much time I would actually have today. I'm like super impressed that the talks have lined up accordingly. So the one thing I planned on was having at least 90 seconds to get you started with AngularJS and Polymer. And I'm an Angular person primarily. Over the past 3 years or so, I've been working with Angular, but more recently I've been working with Ember.js and most recently Polymer. And I've just been blown away by the innovation that's going into this and the results you can achieve with Polymer. So I'm a Polymer novice, but also a Polymer enthusiast. So hopefully some of that comes through. And if there's any way I can help you throughout the hackathon, feel free to come up to me. It seems like there's a few Angular folks around. So if you run into any issues or anything, feel free to give me a yell. And the whole idea behind the 90 seconds is just that I feel like for anything you need to do on a daily basis, that's the maximum attention span. Can you Google it? Can you download it? Can you do something that works in 90 seconds? If you can, then there's a good chance you're going to adopt it. So that's what I'm shooting for here. So, and I welcome any feedback before, during, and after the presentation. You missed your shot on the before. So a little bit about myself is I call myself an all-stack engineer. Used to use the full-stack engineer term, but I found that kind of implies that there's only one true stack, really. There's no shortage of stacks out there now. There's new frameworks being developed all the time. New backends, MongoDB, Postgres, all these tools and services you can use have a place. So I try to adopt a liberal viewpoint on the stack. Previously, I worked at Amazon with web services, a company called Ning that was doing social networking, and various startups who will go unnamed. And right now, I'm working for my own company called SunnyCloud. And short way of describing it is a team of developers you can call in to build your web and mobile applications or rescue projects in danger. And the long story is we're hoping to change the way businesses build applications in the world. So stay tuned. So before we go, I put this QR code up here with the intent that you can use a mobile phone or something, grab the URL, and this will get you to the speaker deck. So if you have an obstructed view seat, like the green monster seat or whatever pesky pole like in Fenway, you can still view the presentation. And that going here, you can also find it off the speaker deck /Sonny Gleason. That combined with these links will give you everything you need to play along with this presentation actually as it goes. So we use a tool called CodePen that is a live updating development environment in the browser. So you can modify all the code snippets in your browser and run them as we go. So the first code pen is just our AngularJS original, because we're trying to show you how do you get from Angular to Angular plus Polymer. And so that's CodePen 1. CodePen 2a is the Angular plus Polymer. And then CodePen 2b shows you the pure Polymer element, which isn't as spectacularly beautiful as the paper elements, but hopefully gets the idea across for your needs. So what's in store? We're going to talk, actually I should check, everyone following along okay so far? Right on, I haven't insulted anybody. All right, so what's in store? We're going to talk a little bit about Angular. Then we'll see how does Polymer fit in, compare and contrast Polymer and Angular a little bit. And we'll also talk about a service called PubNub, which is enabling this real-time web component. So if you look at the background, you'll see our sample app. You can think of it as a simple chat application. It's 99 lines of HTML and JavaScript. And the main components are, we have presence. We can show what users are online. We have the ability to publish a message. And we have the ability to show a live updating stream of messages. And you wouldn't need PubNub to do any of this if you just wanted a local chat with yourself. You can do that just with Angular. But where PubNub comes in is it's a real-time data stream network. So PubNub has a network of machines around the globe, so you don't have to bring up your own WebSocket servers, worry about latency and fault tolerance, all that good stuff. So using a service like this as a service helps you get started, especially in the data streaming. So what's AngularJS? And I'll kind of temper this based on the experience. Have folks used AngularJS before? Nice. All right, a good crew. How many people want to use AngularJS? How many people don't want to use AngularJS? All right, yeah, that's a common theme. But I've gone through the same stages. Finally got to acceptance, and Angular. To me, I respect it a lot because it's a framework for making HTML look like your application should look. And Polymer is a follow-on to help clean up some of the rough edges, because folks who are starting out with Angular have plenty of stumbling blocks. What's a directive? What's a service? How does the dependency injection work? How does this work? Binding all these scopes and variables is really tricky with Angular. But there's still a lot you can do with it, and it's a huge advance. One of the main contributions of Angular is that it made it possible to build these web and mobile applications in a cross-browser way. Doing this before with just jQuery was possible, but still a lot of work. So AngularJS was the advance. So seems good that I prepared well for this presentation. Everyone's experience lines up. They've seen Angular and maybe played with it a little bit before. So I see Polymer as taking some of the best parts of Angular development and making it really cleanly encapsulated, and not trying to solve the how do you build an application problem, but trying to solve the how do you build components that interact to compose an application. And that's been very promising, to me. I have a lot of hope for Polymer, and I'm starting to adopt it in my own projects. And so a lot of times folks will ask, should I use Polymer instead of AngularJS? Really, right now, it's possible to adopt Polymer into your applications and use it fluidly and migrate to it over time. And I think that as these standards evolve, you'll start to see more adoption, and there'll be more patterns of what do the applications look like. For example, Angular 2.0 is a huge initiative to interoperate with web components in Polymer. And then lastly, what's PubNub? I already talked a little bit about this. It's a global data streaming network. Have folks heard of AWS? All right, it's great because you don't have to build your own data centers. You can, there's probably one within 1,000 miles of your users in the world. You have this global presence. PubNub is similar. They have presence in AWS data centers and other data centers, and they're running these real-time data stream services so that you get your publish key and subscribe key as a developer. You start sending messages on channels, and those propagate globally in real time. And the typical time for propagation globally is under 250 milliseconds, or a quarter of a second. So it's very, very fast to get data to your users. And this is really changing the way that I've thought about building web and mobile applications, because it allows for a much more individualized user experience, because it's not a user pulling all this data. Relevant data is being pushed to users in real time and enabling real-time collaboration. Okay, here's my 90 seconds. I had to get here, at least, so this is the point that I was trying to get to. And this is the code pen. And I'll show it live if this works out. Can folks see that font okay? Hopefully it's not too bad. Okay, so this is CodePen. You can get there using the URL. And what we have are the, let's see, 99 lines of HTML as advertised. This is an Angular app. It's pretty minimal. And it implements this chat application. So it looks like some people actually came on. So I'm going to say this is my random message. And if no one else said that, then it will actually show up. Let's see. My scrolling is getting me. This is the beauty of CodePen. So I wanted my message to show at the beginning, but I'm using push, so I need to change that to unshift. For folks who are familiar with JavaScript arrays, I'm just going to change that to unshift here. So put it on the front of the array instead of the back. Okay, so let's try that again. Oh yeah, this is my even more random message. Hi, hi. Okay, so it's working, and you can do this. You can follow along. We're all sharing the same channel on the same demo key. If you want to start building your own application during the hackathon and you don't want to share your channels with everybody else, you can request one at that PubNub trial URL that I had up there. So that's CodePen, and have fun playing along or checking Google News or whatever you feel like doing at the time instead. But in the meantime, while you have a chance to play with this, I'm just going to talk through the parts of these these 99 lines of HTML and JavaScript and what they do, and then I'll come back and revisit it in the Polymer style. And let me see. All right, I'm doing okay on time. Why is real time important? Does anyone recognize this page? Some people may have been born after this page, which is crazy. But this is Amazon.com circa 1995, when the World Wide Web was just starting out. And as you can see, this is HTML 0 effectively, where you've got some H1s, you've got some links, you've got an image, which were few and far between back then. How many people would feel comfortable delivering this as a production user experience right now? All right, nice. That's kind of like what I do. But no, I try and get a little better. Maybe something like this. This is what users are starting to expect. It's not just a desktop browser anymore. You've got your tablet. It's connected via Wi-Fi. You have a strong bandwidth connection. Streaming video. With really nice customer service people. You can search, you can browse online in real time, you can purchase in real time, get notifications. And to build this style of application, we need fundamentally different tools, and the rules of development are kind of changing. Some things that I'd offer to keep in mind: keep your applications customer focused, keep the data individualized to keep it relevant to users. Responsive. You don't know how it's going to be accessed. You send someone a link through email, they could be clicking through Gmail or Inbox or whatever on their mobile device. So you want that first page load coming off of whatever source people are coming from to be responsive, and also live updating, so that they'll keep coming back for the freshest data. Our demo application, like I said, chat with presence and history in very few lines of code, and hopefully it's still working. So what do we have to do to build a real-time chat application under the hood. So how do we interact with the PubNub service? We subscribe to a real-time channel that has a name. In our case, it's the Angular channel, or I may have changed it to the Angular channel 33 or something like that, just to make it a random channel name. We display a list of online users using the presence mechanism, and just like the data stream is real-time, the presence information is real-time as well, so you get real-time updates as devices or users enter in the channel. We want to show the list of recent messages and also provide a way for users to publish to the channel. Okay, so hopefully everyone's been able to get to CodePen who wants to. And we'll start with the HTML. That's a little more gentle. Okay. Script tags and a style sheet link tag. Does that bother anybody? All right, I haven't offended anybody. This is stuff hopefully you've seen before in HTML. We include the PubNub client. That's just their vanilla JavaScript client. We include Angular 1.3.2. It's awesome to not have the beta tag anymore. And we include the PubNub Angular library, which gives us Angular bindings for all this data stream functionality. And then finally, I include Bootstrap to help with the visual design. It also does the browser reset and all that. And you'll probably do something much more fancy and beautiful. Second part of the app is the HTML div. And this should look familiar to Angular folks. The class equals container, that's the Bootstrap. That's just for styling. But the ng app and ng controller, the ng app is declaring the Angular module or application that's enclosing all our application logic. And then the controller is telling us the specific controller in Angular, which is populating the data for this view that is inside the div tag. And so in thinking about Angular, I think about these three things. I think about a controller. A controller is a function that has whatever services you need injected, and the whole point of the controller function is to populate your scope. It populates it with data, and it populates it with functions that update the data or that you bind to actions in your HTML. That's all the controller is about. And then in your view, you use the data and actions from the scope binding with templates. So this is setting up that first part, so we know our application and we know our controller to load. Okay, the next part. Now that we're inside a controller, we have a scope, and the scope is populated with some data. We're going to do some templating, and this should be familiar to Angular folks. We just have a UL with some LIs, so unordered list with list items, and we're using an ng repeat tag to iterate over all the users, which are just simple strings at this point, but you could imagine making them more complex objects with location or favorite color or whatever. If you wanted to put some structure in, then you would probably change that user substitution to user.name, user.lat, user.long, whatever you want to do. And here, we're doing a similar template substitution for messages. Messages is just another array that's in the scope that we want to be live updating. Any questions so far? All right, sweet. Next, we have the publish action. If you remember, to make an actually interesting chat application, you have to have a way for people to enter a message, although sometimes you might not want them to input messages. But here's how you do it. You create a form with an input. You bind the publish function from the Angular scope to the submit action of the form, and then you just populate these two inputs. The first one is a text input, and we're setting its ng model to the new message attribute, which is initialized in the scope. So as you start typing, that's updating the new message variable in the scope. And then when you hit send, the form is going to be submitted, and it's going to trigger that scope.publish action that we defined. All right, so that's our HTML part. Let's go into the JavaScript. So, all right, this is a little tricky. This is Angular world. So we're defining an Angular module. The first part is the name of our application. The second part, that array, is a list of the dependencies that our Angular application needs. In this case, it's the PubNub Angular service. And that's just the name that the PubNub Angular service uses to advertise itself as a dependency. And that's what enables this PubNub object on the side to be injected into the chat controller. And as you can see, we also inject the root scope and the scope into the controller so we can use those, and you'll see why in a little bit. Okay. First part, some simple initialization. The user ID, we just choose a random user ID. In your case, you're probably going to be using something like OmniAuth or Passport, some fancy Node.js authentication, whatever framework you're using for your web app. You'll authenticate your user, and you'll populate the user ID that's associated with that connection to PubNub. The next part is the channel. That's just a simple string variable, and you can set that to whatever you want on your application. And you can create as many of these as you want. So you may have one broadcast channel that is for all the users to use, and then you may have direct message channels between users so that you can start new conversations between them. And then finally, we're just populating a messages array with a welcome message. Just every time you show up, even if there's no history, at the very least, you're going to see welcome to the Angular channel. All right, here's the fancy part. This is why we need root scope. We need root scope because scopes don't survive across controllers in Angular. So I figured that people are going to take this code and reappropriate it to their own applications. And even though I only use one controller, they're probably going to use multiple controllers. So I'm using the root scope so that this PubNub service initialization persists across those page navigation events. Otherwise, you'd be continuously disconnecting and reconnecting to the service. So this allows you to have a persistent connection across your page views. And so that's why we use root scope. Even though it's typically frowned upon to use root scope. Don't go throwing all your data in root scope, or
Is root scope the same as window, or is it different?
Is root scope the same as window? Window is the most global of globals.
Yes.
Root scope is the global for your Angular application. So you can still see window everywhere because it's like the JavaScript global. So if you abuse window, you're probably going to yell that a lot more than if you abuse root scope. But you still shouldn't abuse root scope because it's still contained. And then scope is what you would typically use in a controller, because that limits what's exposed to your views to the narrowest possible amount. All right, this is a freebie. Subscribing to a channel, all you do is call the ng subscribe method on the PubNub service and pass in the channel name. And what that does under the hood is it binds all the real-time events to Angular events. Has anyone heard of scope.on or $scope.$on or anything like that? All right, so this is now you can impress your friends with this advanced Angular feature. The Angular events, you can watch for them using $scope.$on, and then you pass it the event name and so forth. I'll walk you through it in a minute. So this is enabling those background events. How do we publish? That's pretty simple too. We're just going to call the PubNub ngPublish function and just pass it a structured object that contains the name of the channel that we want to publish to. You can publish to any channel name you want, and you can pass any message you want as a string or as a structured object. And all of the PubNub client libraries across dozens of languages, so the standard things you would think about, C#, whatever, all the way to Erlang, Lua, Tessel boards, these tiny hardware boards, AppNet boards. All of those clients, if you pass a structured message in, you'll get a structured message out. If you pass a string message in, you'll get a string message out. And there's features like encryption and all that to take care of security on the wire. So here, we're using the simplest possible message, just a string. And then finally, after we call the publish function, we reset the new message variable to an empty string, just so they can type a new message afterwards. Folks still with me? Okay, now here's that advanced Angular stuff, subscribing to message events. So to do this, you're going to do your root scope dot on, and so we're doing root scope dot on because we also want these subscriptions to survive across page views. We're calling the pubnub.ng message event, and what that does is it takes our channel name and turns it into an event name. So we just prepend a unique prefix to the event so that it's easy and you don't have conflicts between your channel names and your event names. And then we pass it a callback that's invoked when any of those events occur. So when a message event comes in, we push it onto the messages array, or as I just modified, we unshift it to the front. And we can do a similar thing for presence events. We're going to be getting all of these enter and leave events as devices subscribe and unsubscribe from the channel. And in this case, our callback calls within scope.apply. It calls pubnub.listPresence. So every time we know that the presence changed, we just take the presence list from the pubnub Angular library and use that to populate the scope.users array. And so that users array is bound, if you remember, to our list of users, and these presence events may be coming, through the pubnub library asynchronously. So that's why we have to make this change within scope.apply so that Angular knows, hey, we changed something under the hood. And it's relatively easy with a string, but for structured objects and arrays, it typically takes a little fiddling with scope.apply. I'm sure many of the Angular folks have come across this as well. And there's also features for presence and history. When the user joins and you're initially displaying the app, you want to be able to get the current presence list and also pre-populate the messages. So here we're retrieving the latest 500 messages from the channel and using those to pre-populate the message array. And that's it. All right, but it's not the end of the presentation, so don't feel awkward or anything like that. Did everyone follow along with the Angular part so far?
Can you just, I know you tried to explain it, just one more pass. If I modify the scope directly, something doesn't happen that should happen, which is why you did this through a function pass to apply.
Exactly.
Who is it that's watching? What is it? What watcher needed to be told that something's happening?
So here we go, user and users. So here's our user list. We want this DOM to reflect the latest user list, which is updated here. But these updates are coming outside the context of an Angular function. And usually Angular is friendly enough to start the digest cycle for you. But since these events are coming from outside Angular, then it requires a scope.apply so that you're telling Angular the scope changed and doing it.
So if you did this and forgot to do that, and you were screwing around with their documentation, you would try digest and that would work, and you'd say, well, that magic worked, but this is the clever way to do it, the correct way to do that.
Yes, and this is a bit of an optimization too, because in the pubnub library, we could have forced a scope.apply on every event, but the problem is that the user's application isn't necessarily going to respond to all those events. So we want to give the user application a chance to opt out, and that's why you have this. And the symptom that you'll see in Angular in any application where you're updating an array behind the scenes is maybe it happens the first time, maybe it happens the third time, but you see it missing these updates, and it requires other events to fire before it notices that the user's array changed. So if you see that kind of behavior where it's like spotty updates to state in your controller, try scope.apply. Obviously don't shotgun them everywhere around your code, or it's not going to be fun to work with anymore. Try to use the ways that are within the bounds of Angular versus forcibly telling Angular to refresh. But this is something you can use. Does that cover your question?
Would you not say that this is an example of why React is so much more efficient, because you do something that's supposedly inefficient, like updating everything all the time, and it just updates? I mean, is this not one of those cases.
You said React. Did you mean Polymer or did you mean React itself?
I meant React.js.
So I haven't played too much with React yet, so I'll have to play with it and get back to you on that. It definitely looks promising. But what I could comment on is that this is a reason why you would want the observables, in JavaScript, so that you can respond to this more cleanly and propagate those change events more efficiently. So hopefully everyone followed along in that Angular application. Now, I found myself in building this application. Okay, we have a user list, we have a small UI component for sending a message, and we have a UI component for displaying a list of messages. And as I built more complex applications with many views and many screens, I found myself copying and pasting code, I know it's awful, around all my controllers, and I could hoist them into Angular services or Angular directives, but services don't, they're a little more complicated, and directives are even more complicated for beginners to understand. So in order to create a clean application in Angular, at least in terms of the view and how you hook up events and state, it can get really tricky if you're aiming for reuse. I love Angular for creating the application and the controller layout, the routing, that's all very clean. But I was finding that with the views, it was particularly challenging. And even better, I was looking through Polymer and found that Google has these amazing designers working on the material design, which is a phenomenal design philosophy, and they put so much work into it. It's very clean. So now everyone can enjoy these widgets, which is kind of a bummer too, because like in a year everything is going to look like this. So you're gonna have to start innovating now and finding like the next look and feel so that you can get ahead of the curve. But this is so easy to get started with that you're going to see a lot of applications that look like this now, and you can have it now with Polymer. And so that just goes for the visual design aesthetics, really cool. But the HTML code, as you saw from Amruta's and Sam's presentations, it's really clean. It's very declarative. It looks like DOM, and it's relatively straightforward for folks to understand. So putting that all together, Polymer gives us a way to encapsulate the components of our view and hook them up efficiently when we're composing an application. It's not pushing an application design philosophy on us just yet. Angular and Ember and all these other frameworks do plenty of that, pushing the philosophy on you. But Polymer is still keeping it real and dealing just with the web components that you can compose. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm really itching to ask this question. I could have waited until the end, but I believe I echo everyone's sentiment here. If I ask this right now, Polymer seems to be a very good alternative to make cleaner directives. So do you think that's even a workable strategy at this point, to not build your directives strictly Angular based?
Wow, I hooked somebody. So
I'm not sold yet.
Spoiler alert. Yes. So the question is Polymer a more compelling way to build directives? And spoiler alert, I think so. I think it can do a lot of what directives do. I have a slide on here coming up where I'll tell you some of the nuances between them, but that's what I've found to be, that's the thing where I'm just like, wow, that's killer. So for sure. Oh, and it's the next slide. And I didn't tell everyone I didn't point you. But so let's compare AngularJS directives with web components. And the first thing I should have put here is hard for mere mortals and easier for mere mortals. So and the integration style kind of sums that up too. When you're building an AngularJS directive, you're talking JavaScript. You're putting templates in your JavaScript, or maybe you're linking to an externalized HTML file, but it's all using this made-up way of declaring an element that's kind of unnatural, and it takes a lot for people to learn. You know, why does every directive start with that E or that A? You know, like it's visually cluttered and kind of difficult to navigate. With web components, on the other hand, you have imports, and anyone who uses CSS imports, you know, can follow along and they can say, oh, I'm importing this stuff from an HTML file into my application. That makes sense. So the part about directives versus components is I don't think they're one-to-one, because if you look at a component, it's more of a standalone encapsulated object with well-defined interfaces in and out for your state, whereas a directive is more of a mix-in. So with a directive you can target very specific behavior and inject it into an element, and well, a lot of times you have to hope that it just gets along with the other directives, but you have that power of attaching multiple directives to an element. Whereas with a web component, it's a little more opaque in terms of the interfaces. So directives probably give you more power. I think web components, as they evolve, the patterns will emerge of how to get in. And you see that through some of the approaches to state with Angular directives. Directives have a scope, and that scope is nested. And so you have this chain of scopes where if you end up trying to get back to the enclosing controller, it's really tricky to navigate. You end up seeing code like, is it in my parent scope, or is it in parent.parent scope, or is it in 3 levels of parent scope? And as soon as I see parent.parent in the code, like it's a struggle. So that's a challenge for AngularJS directives that you don't really have with web components, because web components have their own state. It's not a nested scope, it's flat, and you can interact with it through well-defined events. And this is in contrast to the data propagation in Angular, which is more implicit and driven through the digest cycle. If that makes any sense.
Sure. Kind of following on to that, with the new version of Angular that's coming out that seems to be more suited for Polymer. Do you see directives being de-emphasized? I mean, does anyone here know?
So Angular seems to be taking an approach of compatibility and reuse of ideas, and they're bringing in some of the newer technologies, like around the newer JavaScript standards for annotations and stuff like that. So I think the vocabulary of an Angular application will stay mostly the same: application controllers, directives, services. I think that'll still be there, and it seems like a primary focus with respect to web components is interoperability in terms of data binding, because right now it's a little broken binding Polymer widgets or web components to Angular scopes and views. It's easy in one direction from Angular to the web components, but it's harder to get the other way. In my example, I actually do it the harder way. So you have to be a little brave to go down that road, but I'll show you a couple of approaches to that. So everyone saw the user list. It was a UL with LIs, and here we have much the same thing in the web component approach. One primary difference is that with Polymer, or with web components, we have to have this explicit template element, which is kind of a downer. You know, it's a little more markup that you have, and then the thing that is actually being repeated is the content inside. So we have a repeat, which is just like an ng repeat, and it's templated user and users, and we're doing a template substitution there. So if you're using Angular, you may say, okay, it's a little more syntax, but by and large, the ideas are mostly the same. It's data binding. And 2 other things worth mentioning are that we have the style tag and the script tag. So the style, as Amruta said, is completely encapsulated within this component, which is great. It's tricky if you want to coordinate among all your components and upgrade and so forth. And there's the techniques that Amruta said of those special CSS paths that you can use. But the encapsulation is really nice. And then this is what I was talking about in terms of the self-contained state and well-defined operations. So if you look at the script tag for this web component, you see a declaration of an element. It's the Polymer web component called the pubnub-user list. we publish a user's attribute, and we have its initial value, and we say reflect true. And reflect true just means that we propagate that out because outside users are probably binding to it. We initialize the attribute users itself with an empty array. And then with Polymer, you get this users changed behavior for free. So for any attribute, you get this change event, and there's more events you can bind to. And here we're just console.logging the current state of the user's component. But you could imagine propagating events among components and having a much nicer set of connections than just update the scope and then expect everything to propagate everywhere magically. That gets a little tricky as you start building a larger application and you have a lot of components to worry about. And the last thing I want to mention on web components is, especially in talking with Rob Dodson, it's an emerging best practice to, like, I really like this because it's self-contained and you can say, bam, here's this HTML and it's everything. That's pretty awesome. But you can also use, you should start to externalize your style sheets and scripts, and that has many happy benefits. If you like CoffeeScript, any CoffeeScript users out there? Right on. Yeah, so you can use CoffeeScript. If your coworkers like or don't like CoffeeScript, you can have those battles with them. And similarly for less and other style sheet technologies. By externalizing those, you can integrate them into your build process, which is nice. Because when I started working with this, I was worried, oh, am I going to have to go back to the HTML dungeons, from years ago and not be able to use like Haml and stuff like that, or Jade, or whatever your favorite compact HTML syntax is of the day. Okay, and I think I just have enough time to talk about the connection between AngularJS and Polymer. How do you get data between them? The preferred kind of nice way for the Polymer elements themselves, like the paper elements, is this ng Polymer elements project on GitHub, which you can all see. And then the proof of concept hack, which does two-way binding right now, and you can play around and actually see it, is this Angu Poly. And so I kind of went the danger route today because it's a hackathon, and if you can't move fast and break things, why not? But ng Polymer elements gives you a cleaner interface for your application, so you can actually use the out-of-the-box paper elements and expect them to work. The challenge is that it's not two-way data binding; it's just from Angular to Polymer with those ng Polymer elements. But with Angu Poly, it's bidirectional. So even though you may have to do a little more work to integrate a component, you get that right now. And I have a few slides for the Brave. I'll kind of go through them. Everyone has the presentation. The main things are including the Polymer libraries. So platform.js, which is now, anyone out there now? Webcomponents.js in 0.5.1. Polymer.js is still Polymer.js. I'm including this Angu Poly. And for folks who haven't heard of rawgit.com, it's kind of a nice tool. If you ever need to include a static file from GitHub, you can just take the GitHub path and then put rawgit.com on the beginning and use it in your application. I mean, obviously don't run Amazon traffic through that because it'll shut you off. But it's pretty neat for composing JavaScript from different projects quickly. I use it in CodePens a lot. And then lastly, the last part is this HTML file from the CodePen where I defined the web component. So if you look at the CodePen, this MYDWQL in the URL right there, trust me on it because I know you probably can't read it. That is what is here. And if you add the .html extension, you can include any file from CodePen, the HTML, the CSS, or the JavaScript. So you get your include set, and then you can use this fancy pubnub user list widget in your application. And it's a custom element. It's really fancy. And what the Angu Poly attribute is doing is it's a directive that sets up the two-way binding between those two, between Angular and Polymer. They're respective to data representations. And then, so that's for the Brave. For the Pure, you can use the NG Polymer Elements project, and this is what it's aiming for. I didn't integrate this into the CodePen because it wouldn't have been as interesting to do just one-way binding. But essentially, it looks like just include the NG Polymer Elements JavaScript, and then you can start using these text areas with ng model equals blah, and it just magically works. It goes in and it attaches event listeners to all of the paper components, so it takes care of that two-way binding for you. And of course, don't fall too much in love with either of those two approaches, because Angular 2.0 is coming out, and that's going to have better integration with web components. So this is more of an interim solution. The real solution is coming out, and folks like Ember.js are following along too. So expect innovation in those frameworks on the data binding side too. All right, and that's really it. That's all I have. Hopefully I came in on time, but if anyone has questions, you can ask them now or grab me later. Thanks.
So we have time. Excuse me. We have time for a couple quick questions if anyone's got them for Sai.
Sure. Both Angular and Ember, it seems, are rethinking in some ways their prevalence of two-way binding. Do you think Polymer is going to help to alleviate some of the problems of running infinite digest cycles and whatever happens in Ember?
For sure, and there's browser features which are on the way too. So making JavaScript objects observable will help fix some of the problems with having to run a digest cycle. So I see Angular and Ember are exposing these patterns of application development, and then you look across all these frameworks, you see what they need, and then these are, Chrome is moving so fast and innovating that they can build this stuff into the browser, and other browser vendors are adopting this stuff. So Polymer is even closer to the Chrome team. They work very closely together. So I see it. I absolutely see it driving efficiency. So because Angular will be able to use these browser innovations that debut in Polymer, but most likely they'll come out simultaneously, because as the browser releases come, everyone is paying a lot of attention to it. So I expect there to be fast adoption. Oh, right on, in the back.
So playing with so I developed in Angular, and initially it was a headache trying to establish how controllers talk to each other, how controller directives talk to each other, and directives to directives talk. How does Polymer do that? How does elements talk to each other if needed to talk to each other? Is there a way to inject?
Right, yeah, so there's this event model which you can use. I kind of alluded to it with the event changed, but you can start building up this vocabulary of events, and I'm not primed on the syntax for it right now, but imagine that you have this flexible event syntax that you can use. So each component you build has state, so attributes you can get and set, and it also has events which can fire. And between those two things, it should get kind of bearable. I mean, it's almost like native application development in GUIs, maybe a few years ago, where you're dragging and dropping widgets onto a form and you're hooking up the events like onClick and stuff like that. Oh, sure.
I wanted to add, I think one nice feature of Angular that you touched on was sort of using services as well. And I think services which serve as singletons can be a really good strategy for sharing information and logic between controllers. So that's a good, we're using Angular and services, I think that's a pretty good group.
Yeah, absolutely. So the suggestion is apply services to cases where logic and data is needed across controllers. That's a great approach, and I know personally it was kind of tricky. I'd had to do some soul searching as a novice. Like, do I use a service? Do I use a directive? Do I use a factory? And all these things. But when all is said and done, if you get services in there and you can compose them flexibly, it's it's really nice. The tricky bit is when they start having a view component because the service can't have associated view really. So I could see, I mean, if you look at the Polymer approach of an AJAX, which is about as abstract a service as you can have, it's kind of cool to see services phrased as web components. So I'm looking forward to those patterns too.
Cool. Thank you very much, Sonny.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so we've had great speakers this morning. I think you did an awesome job. I love having not only the basic material, but also the contextual stuff and a little bit of real world, how it interacts with things. So we think they're awesome speakers, but we want to know what you think. So there's a survey up here. It's bit.ly Poly Hack Day is where the survey is located. So if people could go to that and fill it out, let us know what you thought of the talks, of the material, the speakers. It's not that we aren't interested in your opinions of this afternoon's speakers, who are also going to be great, but those are going to be more lightning talks and quick hit kinds of things. And we'll be, so we had kind of the core of the stuff this morning, so that's why we're doing the survey based on that. For some reason, we chose a not very unique event name that you'll find when you go to the survey. So it says like Polymer DevFest or something without the word Boston or anything in there. But it does come up preloaded to the correct event. So just don't change that on the pull down and you'll be fine. So this afternoon, so we're going to have a break for lunch. Have an opportunity to ask speakers questions, network with each other, chow down food, enjoy the view of the sailboat race, so on. We'll be starting up again at 1:15, and we'll have a set of lightning talks. And then we're going to be breaking up into actually doing some hacking. So I'm open to ideas how to organize that. My thought was that we would have people pitch ideas or pitch topics, and then if you hear something interesting, you can go and work on that. If you have your own idea, you can pitch that instead. So we'll do kind of a loose organization like that to get things kicked off, and we'll have a few hours to be able to see if we can build something interesting and then show it off to folks at the end of the day. So when you're done with your survey, but not before, lunch is outside. Oh, and the hashtag is up there as well. It's Hackademic if you're tweeting. And for people watching the web broadcast, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in half an hour.